All right. It's been a Auth marathon, which is good, because if you know me, you know I love Auth in every form: authentication, authorization, whatever. At OneGraph, we integrate a lot of external services, Salesforce and Clearbit and on and on and on, which means I get to implement Auth a lot. I chew through that glass all the time. And I actually captured some footage of my typical experience dealing with Auth. Just love it. One of my favorite things. You're getting there, you see the data you want, you and the data, you lock eyes. It's love at first sight. Then you got to figure out how to implement the OAuth client. Or you're implementing an API, and you're trying to specify rules. And we've seen a lot of different techniques for doing that. It's just a fundamentally painful problem. So authentication is relatively easy, right? It's just, who are you? Authorization is a little bit more difficult. It's, what are you allowed to do? And what you're allowed to do depends on certain facts about you, right? Are you a member of my GitHub organization? Do you own this Salesforce account? And the thing is, looking up those facts about you is typically a lot of work, right? I have to reach deep into these different APIs, databases, whatever it might be, to pull that out and figure out what you're allowed to do, and then condense that down to maybe a JWT or something like that. And it would be nice if we had a well-formed graph, if we could express where to look up these facts about you. And so I hacked on this little thing called Auth Guardian, because OneGraph does have a nice graph where we can say, hey, I know how to look up whether or not you're a member of my GitHub organization. And I thought maybe we could actually bring that up to a higher level, where as a human being, I can describe the rules for authorization in my application, or my API, or my service, whatever it might be. So the idea here is we're going to specify some rules. And whatever service we ask our user to log into, GitHub, Salesforce, Spotify, whatever it might be, we're going to run all of the rules. And if a rule passes, we're going to run the effect. So let's get started here. So I'm going to say, for example, on GitHub, if your login status is true, then what I want to do is set a value of user.isLoggedIn. And I'll just hardcode this to true. And over on the right here, it's showing me a preview of what this jot is going to look like. And this is based off of facts about me. And right now, I'm not logged into GitHub. So I'm going to go ahead and log into GitHub. Go ahead and grant it access. And you can see that I get this nice preview. OK, that looks right. I am logged into GitHub. It's great. I want to add another effect here, though, where I'm going to set the user.id to a built-in value. And these are values that we know exist out in the internet somewhere. So for example, maybe the GitHub user ID. And you can see, there we go. That's my GitHub user ID. And I want to do maybe user.login. And we'll do this as GitHub login. And so I'm able to kind of specify that in my application, I want users to be able to log in with GitHub. And if they do successfully log into GitHub, I want to populate my JWT with this information. So I'll add maybe another rule, which is going to be, if you're a member of an organization called OneGraph, then I'm going to go ahead and maybe on Hasura, I'm going to set your default role to admin. And you can see there it knows how to populate the roles inside of Hasura. And Hasura also has this concept of user IDs. So I'm going to go ahead and say that on Hasura, I want to set the user ID. In this case, I'm going to just set it to the GitHub or login. So now it knows how to set that. It's cool. I want this token to work with other services as well, though. Right? Hasura is maybe not the only service. So I'm going to go ahead. I have an Express application. And based off of this, if you're a member of OneGraph, in my Express application, I want to give you access to the admin routes. Similarly, on Netlify, We'll skip Netlify for right now. Maybe, for example, I want to say, if you have contributed to OneGraph in some way, I want to give you some benefits, maybe some discount. So I'm going to say that if you've started a repository called OneGraph/Graphical Explorer, then I'm going to set a value called user.discount to 0.1. So maybe now whenever you go to my Shopify store, if you've starred my repository, I'm going to give you a 10% discount, because I'm cool like that. Now I want to say, in Salesforce, if you're logged into Salesforce, and it turns out that your Salesforce email, which is verified by them, is equal to onegraph.com, then on Netlify, I want to go ahead and add the sales role. So Netlify is a static hosting site, and you can actually use JWT to say, this route is protected by some role, and you can only access it if you have it. So in this case, maybe I have a sales dashboard somewhere, and I only want to let you get access to it if you're logged into Salesforce and you belong to my org. So I can specify that. And we'll do one last one. We'll say that on Twitch, if you have a login status of true, then I want to go ahead and on Apollo, I'll call you a Twitcher. And see if I can log into Twitch. There we go. OK, so now I have one JWT that is going to work for Apollo, for Hasura, for Netlify, for Express. And as a human being, I can look at these rules and say, this makes sense, right? These are succinct enough for me to be able to audit and verify them. And when it comes time, maybe this is not powerful enough. What we're going to do is actually analyze the rules, and we will say, these are the data dependencies. This is the GraphQL query you need to get all of the data for your JWT. And not only that, but here is the compiled JavaScript that you can run that will produce that same exact JWT. So you can come in here whenever you're getting started with any service, quickly specify your rules that rely on data about you across the internet, and then whenever you're ready, go ahead and eject, take it, and you have a full escape hatch. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And we'll take a look at what this actually looks like in practice. So this is a little React app that just shows if I'm logged in. So I'm going to log into GitHub. And this is an app that's using those same Auth Guardian rules. So you can see I've logged into GitHub, and it has specified all this stuff. There's no Apollo account here because I'm not logged into Twitch. But this has generated a full JWT that I can just use inside of React. And this entire application is something like 100 lines of code. But then maybe we want to use this elsewhere. This is what it might look like if we were trying to use this inside of Express, where we just take our Express JWT permissions. We put in our OneGraph app ID, so we can pull the Auth Guardian rules. And then we just have middleware that just says, hey, in order to get access to this, you have to have an Express permission of admin. Similarly for Apollo, so using custom directives, you simply annotate your fields and say, you have to have a role of admin to read this field, or you have to be logged in for this one, and this token is going to work with it. And part of what I love about this, so I hate Auth and I hate integrations, because that's what I work on all the time. And they need to go away. We spend so much time focused on it because it is a difficult problem. But Hasura has this new feature called remote joins coming. They already have the ability to pull in remote schemas, which is amazing. So I have this one token already here that has been generated. And I can query Hasura, and I can get my to-dos. And these are scoped according to my user ID, which has been specified by Auth Guardian. And I can also query into GitHub. That one token is going to work with upstream APIs like GitHub or Salesforce or Spotify or whatever. So Hasura kind of becomes my one endpoint that is able to pull in Apollo, OneGraph, any sort of GraphQL API, apply all of those permissions, and then do all these crazy joins. And then that's going to go a step further with their new remote joins. So this is where you've already pulled in a GraphQL API. So in this case, I have a user table, and it has this terrible, terrible field called Stripe Customer ID. And a Stripe Customer ID is a foreign key. And the only reason you have a foreign key is to get to the stupid thing, right? No one wants Stripe Customer ID. What you want is Stripe Customer. So what I'm going to do is come in here and add a derived field. And I'm going to say, I don't want Stripe Customer. Or Stripe Customer ID, I want Stripe Customer. And the way this works is I'm going to add this field, so Stripe Customer. I'm going to pull it in from OneGraph. It comes from Stripe. It's a customer field. And the customer ID is parameterized by the column. So I hit save, and I'm done. I now have a field where I can query into Hasura, get my user, and join on Stripe, and pull in the customer, all their list of charges, their refunds. That is days or weeks of work, of effort. The challenge is you need one token that's going to work with Stripe and Hasura and all of your other APIs. So the idea here is that we can actually distill down all of these rules using GraphQL to make Auth significantly easier, not just inside of Hasura, but inside of Express or Netlify or anywhere. Yeah, so that's it. Cheers.